They said the chapel had been abandoned for centuries, but buildings never really sleep. Stones breathe, wood remembers. And when workers broke through the plaster wall in the summer of 2001, they did not just find dust and moss. They found something that seemed to have been waiting. The chamber was shallow, barely the size of a coffin. At first they thought it was a repair niche, the kind masons carve to hide cracks. But there, under a thin crust of lime and soot, was a box of lead, its edges sweating corrosion, its weight disproportionate to its size. The foreman cursed, assuming it was just waste from some forgotten renovation. Yet one of the younger men insisted it looked older, heavier, deliberate. They lifted it out into the light. The lid groaned open with a sound like a hinge deep in the earth. Inside lay a disc, not gold, not silver. Something duller, stranger. Its surface shimmered with a gray that seemed to drink the sunlight. It was cold to the touch, colder than metal should have been in that summer air. They called it, simply, the plate. But later, scholars gave it a different name, the last sigil. At its heart was a cross, 6 arms radiating outward, but one broken, jagged at the end as if severed. Around it ran a band of symbols, astronomical marks, fragments of zodiac, and smaller cuts too fine for the naked eye. Some looked like letters, others like scratches left by accident. Only later would magnification reveal that the scratches were not random at all, but grooves, layered like a record, their depths measured in fractions of millimeters. The men did not know what they had found. To them it was nothing more than an odd relic. Yet as word spread, whispers followed. Templar hordes, hidden vaults, forbidden sigils. Within weeks, photographs had leaked onto obscure forums. The name Dr. Hervé Langla surfaced, a local historian who claimed to have studied the object before it was quietly removed. His notes, published briefly and then withdrawn, described the disc in almost reverent tones. It is not art. It is not icon. It is geometry turned into matter. Some said the Vatican intervened. Others swore the artifact was taken into a private collection. The official report listed it as liturgical ornament, uncertain date. But the language of bureaucracy could not erase the images already spreading. The 6-armed cross, the broken arm, the wheel within the wheel. What makes an object more than an object? Perhaps the context in which it sleeps. That chapel in Bezu had already been linked, in rumor if not in fact, to the suppressed rites of the Templar. It sat at a crossroads of old pilgrimage paths, near caves where shepherds once spoke of lights in the rock. The walls were scarred with graffiti from the 14th century, crude crosses, a serpent, a circle half finished. All of it background noise, until the sigil appeared. Langla's leaked photographs showed the disc tilted slightly, as though it had been placed not flat, but leaning, as if meant to face something unseen. He noted a faint indentation at its center, a depression no larger than a fingernail. A pivot, he speculated. A place where light, or perhaps pressure, might enter. The broken arm pointed outward, not aligned with the others, but veering off, like a compass needle refusing true north. Skeptics dismissed it. A devotional medallion, oversized. A forgery planted to stir tourist interest. Yet the grooves did not behave like ornamentation. When a laser scan was attempted, before the artifact vanished, the diffraction patterns produced by the surface were inconsistent with random scratching. Instead, they formed repeatable geometries, spirals nested within spirals, numbers hidden in the way light scattered. A disc, a cross, a wheel, broken but precise, silence embedded in metal. The story could have ended there, filed away under curiosities, but it did not, for the sigil was not alone. In the decades that followed, fragments emerged. A vellum manuscript describing the guardian of the last sigil, a pendant discovered in the Black Forest with the same 6-armed star, a ring inscribed with 13 dots, one displaced. Each piece added weight to the first discovery. Each suggested the disc was not anomaly but anchor, part of a larger geometry. And then there were the whispers, the ones scholars prefer not to cite. Accounts of workers who heard a hum when the box was first opened. Low, like a bee trapped in stone, too faint to record, yet undeniable to those present. One swore the sound stopped the moment he touched the broken arm, as if the object had been waiting for recognition. Is that superstition? A trick of memory? Perhaps. Yet the motif repeats. Time and again, those who encounter the sigil speak of sound, silence, vibration. The wheel turning without motion, the hum of something beneath perception. If we accept nothing, then the disc is just metal. If we accept too much, it is a prophecy cast in alloy. The truth lies somewhere in between. But what cannot be denied is this. Someone, centuries ago, went to great lengths to hide it, to build a wall around it, to let it wait. Why? Perhaps because they believed it dangerous, perhaps because they believed it holy, or perhaps because it was not meant for them at all, but for us. Those who would live to see a particular year, a particular alignment, a particular silence, a cross with one arm broken, a wheel still turning, a chamber sealed, and a question left hanging in the dust. What happens when the sigil wakes? When we first look at the sigil, it tempts us to see only what is obvious, a circle, a cross, some scratches. But objects of power often disguise themselves in simplicity. The surface is plain only until the eye lingers too long. Then the plainness folds back like a curtain, and a deeper geometry begins to emerge. Start at the center. A depression, less than 2 millimeters across. Small enough to ignore, yet deliberate enough to suggest intent. No random hammer strike could have created it. Under magnification, its walls slope perfectly, neither chipped nor jagged. Some researchers believe it was designed to hold a jewel or pin, but the more unsettling hypothesis is that it was never meant to hold anything at all. It was meant to focus, a pivot, a node. From that center, 6 arms radiate. 5 stretch with clean symmetry. The 6th is fractured, shorter, as though broken mid-gesture. The break unsettles the pattern, unbalances the wheel. Some scholars have called it symbolic, imperfection inserted as reminder of mortality. But computer modeling reveals something else. The break is precisely angled, not random, not damaged, deliberate. Now follow the arms outward. They terminate at the edge of a broad ring, each arm dividing the circle into sectors. To the naked eye, the spacing looks uneven, but under measurement, the angles align to prime sequences, numbers that repeat in mathematical resonance. The broken arm, though shorter, still points in ratio, its absence echoing its presence. This is not ornament, this is equation. Along the outer band, dozens of notches cut deep into the metal. At first, they seem scattered, irregular. Yet when analyzed with digital calipers, they fall into Fibonacci spacing, intervals known for centuries to describe growth spirals in shells, leaves, galaxies. The sigil wears the same sequence, but on a scale so fine it cannot be seen without assistance. It is as though someone inscribed the universe's fingerprint into a piece of iron. And then there are the grooves. So shallow they appear accidental until mapped by laser. Their paths loop into spirals, self-similar at every scale, fractals, repeating endlessly inward and outward. When the grooves are translated into frequency, they model a resonance field, and at 729 Hz, a frequency neither random nor common, they collapse into silence. The wheel turns, and then it stills. This is where fact slides into theory. Some say the sigil was never meant for worship. It was a machine. A computational device not powered by fire or water, but by alignment. Rotate it beneath light, as Dr. Leonard Duquesne did in his laboratory, and it scatters illumination into patterns no medieval artisan could have imagined. Angles refract, shadows overlap, and from the overlap, numbers emerge. Duquesne's papers, quietly suppressed after publication, describe a golden ratio spiral traced in the space between arms. He found the broken arm carried its own weight, skewing the spiral until it revealed the constant 729. 3 to the 6th power, a number linked to cycles of restoration in Hermetic texts, to ritual recurrence every 729 years in the Charter of 13. A countdown written, not in ink, but in geometry. What kind of mind conceives such a design? To carve Fibonacci intervals by hand, to encode prime sequences without notation, to inscribe fractal resonance centuries before fractals had a name. Did the Templars themselves forge it, drawing on hidden manuscripts smuggled from Byzantium, from Arabic scholars, from Egyptian star priests? Or did they only inherit it, finding in the sigil a relic older than their order, older perhaps than history itself? The sigil resists answer. It is too perfect for coincidence, too obscure for proof. It sits between categories, part artifact, part equation. Those who dismiss it as forgery cannot explain why its geometry replicates natural constants. Those who treat it as sacred symbol cannot explain why it behaves like a machine. But listen closely, and another motif emerges: silence. Every measurement, every resonance test, every theoretical model ends not in sound, but in hush. As though the sigil waits, as though it is less a voice than an ear, less a prophecy than a receiver. The anatomy of the sigil is anatomy of waiting. A broken arm pointing not to what is, but to what is missing. A wheel not to carry, but to measure. Grooves that do not sing until the right light, the right angle, the right hour. And perhaps that is the lesson of its form. Not destruction, not triumph, but pause. A cosmic breath held across centuries, one that may release when the alignment returns. Because if the sigil is a body, then its broken arm is not flaw but heart. A fracture that beats once every 729 years, calling not in thunder, but in silence. What does a machine built from silence do when it wakes? That is the question etched into its grooves, a question the anatomy alone cannot answer. Yet every line, every notch, every ratio points forward, to a moment when the hum beneath stillness becomes audible. And so we linger here, on the surface of metal, not knowing if we are looking at art, relic, or trigger, only knowing that someone wanted us to look. Someone wanted the wheel to survive the centuries, the cross broken, the circle intact, the silence waiting. The sigil remembers, and now so do we. Long before the sigil was pulled from stone and dust, its shadow had already bled into parchment. We do not mean shadow in the ordinary sense, the kind cast by candle or moonlight. This was a shadow of memory, of symbol repeated too many times to be coincidence. Open the brittle pages of forgotten codices, and the same forms emerge, circles fractured, wheels silent, lines broken as though waiting for repair. Consider the Codex Leontius, attributed to a monk who fled Avignon during the persecutions of 1312. The manuscript is incomplete, half its leaves burned, half water-stained. But what survives is enough to haunt. One passage reads, "The circle speaks once, the seal waits twice. The arm is broken, yet the wheel remembers." The phrasing is opaque, more poem than record. And yet, when aligned with the geometry of the sigil uncovered centuries later, the echo becomes undeniable. 6 arms, 1 broken, a wheel that remembers. Historians dismiss it as allegory, a monk's fevered imagination. But tucked in the margin, drawn faintly in iron gall ink, is a sketch. Not a crucifix, not a compass, but a 6-pointed wheel with a jagged spoke. The resemblance is too precise. The manuscript predates the modern rediscovery by 7 centuries. What then was Leontius describing? A vision? A memory? Or the same artifact we now struggle to interpret? Another fragment surfaces in the chronicle of the Hidden Ones, smuggled from Avignon in the early 1700s. Its lines weave between prayer and riddle. We do not guard the blade nor the book. We guard the hour. We are the eyes between the minutes, the silence between the stars. It never mentions the sigil by name, but the imagery resonates. A wheel of time, guardians of silence, watchers whose loyalty is not to treasure, but to rhythm. Scholars call it mystical nonsense, yet in the folds of its prose, the same mathematics recurs. The number 13, the cycle of 729 years, ratios hidden like seeds within the lines. as though the manuscript itself is less a devotional chant and more an encrypted manual, a ritual instruction disguised in metaphor. And then there is the Spira Obscura, a scroll discovered in Portugal in 1906 among the ruins of a Templar outpost. Its diagrams seem at first abstract, circles within circles, spirals intersecting arcs. But when modeled through modern software, the images resolve into orbital resonances between Earth, Mars, and Saturn across centuries. In one corner, a phrase in Latin, Ovimus spherus fractus loqui in silentio. We heard the broken spheres speak in silence. That refrain recurs across other manuscripts. The broken spheres, the silence that follows, the wheel that hums, always Saturn, always the fracture, always silence. Did these scribes inherit the same geometry? Or were they each independently haunted by echoes of a pattern larger than their own age? Here is the historical fact. During the trials of the Templars, interrogators recorded strange confessions. Knights spoke under torture of a silence deeper than death, of drawing the chord that no longer sounds. One transcript even preserves a phrase, "The last light is theirs, gone to the hills." Dismissed as madness, yet centuries later, fragments of vellum and scroll whisper the same themes. Silence, broken arms, circles that speak. The callback is unavoidable. From the rediscovered sigil in Bezu to the Leontius Codex to the Spira Obscura, the motif repeats across mediums and centuries. Coincidence grows brittle under its own weight. But what does it mean? One theory holds that the manuscripts record fragments of a larger whole, pages scattered, copied, mistranslated, but always pointing to a central design. A manual divided, hidden across Europe so no single persecutor could destroy it. Another theory suggests something stranger, that the sigil itself projects its pattern backward, rippling into the minds of those attuned, causing scribes to sketch shapes they had never seen, to write phrases they could not explain. Dreams disguised as scripture, geometry disguised as prayer. Perhaps that is why the language of these manuscripts feels so cryptic, so liminal, half poetry, half equation. They are not meant to explain, they are meant to recall, to preserve not facts, but rhythm, not instruction, but resonance. And in their recurrence, they reveal the anatomy of secrecy itself. Knowledge too fragile to say aloud finds refuge in metaphor. A cross becomes a wheel, a silence becomes a song, and a countdown becomes a prayer whispered in margins. What strikes us is not the clarity of these echoes, but their persistence. They appear where they should not, in codices burned by inquisitors, in scrolls buried under collapsed chapels, in letters signed not with names but with broken stars, each one a fragment of a chorus that has never been sung aloud. And so we begin to understand the sigil not as isolated artifact, but as center of a library without shelves, a memory without pages. Its presence scattered into manuscripts that do not know each other, yet hum in unison across time. The Leontius Codex, the canonicle of the hidden ones, the Spira Obscura, 3 witnesses, 3 echoes, 3 reminders that silence itself may be the loudest message of all. Because if the manuscripts are right, if the wheel remembers, then the sigil does not simply measure time. It keeps it. It holds silence until the hour demands release. And perhaps that is why the scribes trembled. Not because they feared destruction, but because they feared remembering. The broken arm, the waiting wheel, the silence that speaks. The manuscripts whisper it again and again. The sigil is not myth, it is memory. And one day, memory returns. What happens when a memory older than history remembers us back? The Black Forest has always carried a weight heavier than its trees. Travelers described it as if the woods themselves leaned inward, closing around paths, narrowing the air. Legends grew easily there, witches, ghosts, creatures with eyes like lanterns. But among these tales lies one account that does not fade into folklore. It is too detailed, too plain. A field journal written in October of 1894. Dietrich Clausen was not a mystic. He was a civil engineer, employed to survey land for a railway extension near Freiburg. His notebooks until that night were tedious: soil density, rainfall charts, complaints about damp boots. Yet in the small hours of October 21st, his hand trembled into something else. He wrote of waking to a hum, low, rhythmic, not thunder, not wind. When he stepped outside his tent, torchlight flickered in the distance. Through the trees, he saw them. 13 figures, hoods drawn, circling a stone etched with 6 lines, one fractured. He wrote with engineer's precision. They moved without voice, yet I heard a tone, continuous, unbroken, as if the wheel itself sang. His assistants claimed the next morning they had seen nothing. But Clausen found something by the stone, a pendant of dark metal, engraved with a 6-pointed star, and, at its center, the planetary glyph for Saturn. He kept it, carried it, and 3 years later, he was found drowned in his bathtub. His wife recalled his mutterings in the final months, mirrors turning, wheels humming, silence deeper than death. Here is the historical fact: the pendant was real. In 1974, a metallurgical lab in Munich analyzed it. The alloy defied classification, trace elements of iridium and antimony, proportions unknown in European metallurgy of the 19th century. Its engravings, microscopic and precise, included a recess identical to the depression at the sigil's center. And yet, the pendant itself has vanished from public archives. Only a black and white photograph remains, labeled Uncatalogued Sample, Echo Artifact. What do we make of this? Skeptics call Clausen's account a dream, a trick of exhaustion. But the geometry on the stone he described matches perfectly the sigil unearthed at Bezu centuries later. 6 arms, 1 broken, a circle that hums. The pendant confirmed what his words suggested. The Black Forest gathering was no accident of imagination. So who were the 13? Some records from Prussian police files mention a group called Die Stillwache, the Silent Watch. Scattered references appear through the 1800s. Midnight congregations, equinox gatherings, whispered letters about the fracture beneath the firs. Most were dismissed as Masonic offshoots or Rosicrucian experiments. Yet a classified memorandum from 1851, now declassified, describes an intercepted letter speaking of the return of the 13 and the reawakening of the fracture. The location? Freiburg. The callback tightens, numbers repeat, 13 figures circling, a sigil with 1 broken arm, the glyph of Saturn, a hum not sung by mouths. And the same year recurrence, 729, whispering from parchment to forest floor. Some scholars suggest the Black Forest ritual was commemorative, a symbolic reenactment of older traditions. But Clausen's words resist that reading. There were no mouths, only the note. If the sound was real, it was not made by the robed figures. It was made by the stone, or by what the stone aligned with. Theories multiply. Perhaps the figures were watchers, heirs of the Charter of 13. Perhaps the ritual was not remembrance, but activation. If the sigil responds to light and rotation, might it also respond to sound? Could a harmonic field collapse be triggered not in laboratory models, but by voices, or by silence itself? The hum recurs in other testimonies. In Avignon trial transcripts, knights spoke of the chord that no longer sounds. In Icelandic sagas, strangers from the south were called Stjarnaverdir, star watchers, who carved wheels in stone and sang without song. In Clausen's forest, the echo deepened. Silence that was not absence, but vibration too low for the ear. Here, fact bends again toward theory. What if the sigil is not only geometry, but resonance? A device built to react when sound, structure, and timing converge. If so, then the Black Forest ritual was not pageantry. It was calibration. 13 figures, circling stone, acting as human alignment markers. The pendant is key, the hum is signal, and the chilling thought: perhaps the figures themselves were unaware. Perhaps the resonance needed only their presence, the weight of human bodies arranged around geometry, to stir the silence awake. Clausen drowned in his own bathtub. Lionel Ashcombe died staring at a broken ring. Fra Leontius fled with half-burned manuscripts. Again and again, witnesses to the hum unravel, not killed by blade or fire, but by silence too heavy to carry. So we return to the motif. Silence, broken arm, wheel, hum, in manuscripts, in pendants, in trial confessions, in forests. Always circling, always recurring, always preparing. If Clausen truly saw 13 robed figures in 1894, then the cycle was already in motion. Preparations were not waiting for 2039. They were rehearsed long before, in shadows beneath the trees. The sigil waits, the forest remembers, and silence hums where no voice sings. What then was truly activated in the Black Forest? In an archive room beneath the Torre de Tombo in Lisbon, filed between centuries of maritime records, lies a document that should not exist. A single sheet of vellum, brittle with age, inked in a blend of Latin and Galician Portuguese. Its heading is plain: Carta dos 13 Silenciosos, the Charter of the 13 Silent Ones. Unsigned, undated, anonymous. Yet pressed faintly into the corner is a seal, a cross with 6 arms, one fractured. The same geometry, the same wound. At first glance, the charter appears devotional. Its phrases carry the cadence of liturgy. Tend the wheel, seal the mouth, ignite the circle when time curls upon itself. But line by line it betrays itself. This is not prayer, it is instruction. Ritual prescription written as if for ghosts. The document prescribes the formation of a conclave. 13 individuals, nameless and faceless, chosen once every 729 years. Their duty: to guard the silence, to witness the return of the fractured arm, to act when the sky itself turns. The text never names the sigil directly. Instead, it circles around it, repeating numbers and symbols that echo its very design. 13, 729, the broken cross, the wheel. Here is the historical fact. The document is catalogued. Its existence is acknowledged. It is stored under the innocuous label, private devotional text, unknown sectarian origin. But specialists who have seen it agree. The structure of its stanzas is too deliberate, too mathematical to be mere mysticism. Each stanza contains 7 lines, 13 stanzas in total, 91 lines, exactly the number of days in a solar quarter. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. 4 quarters, 4 seasons. One wheel divided, fractured. Coincidence begins to feel like denial. And buried within the final stanza lies the most enigmatic line of all. Upon the return of the 6-pointed cross to the southern stone and the shadow of Saturn upon the Virgin, the watch shall resume. Read plainly, it is nonsense. But cross-reference it with astronomical charts, and its meaning sharpens. August 2039, when Saturn crests Virgo during the Great Alignment, 729 years after the Templar dissolution in 1310. The charter is not myth. It is a countdown protocol. The callbacks tighten here. 729, again and again. The same number hidden in the sigil's ratios. The same cycle whispered in manuscripts. The same frequency modeled in resonance. Always returning to 729. Not allegory, but interval. The charter offers little comfort. Its language is oblique. The watchers shall not know one another until the mirror darkens. Some interpret this to mean the sigil itself acts as trigger, awakening awareness, perhaps even memory, in those chosen. If true, the 13 are not selected by men, but by the rhythm of the wheel itself. The unsettling possibility emerges. The watchers are not a sect. They are a mechanism. Human components in a circuit larger than themselves. And when the alignment returns, they will not need to seek each other. They will simply converge. One historian, Tomás Frade da Costa, writing in 1987, traced peculiar genealogies around Languedoc and Portugal, families whose names recur every 7 centuries, deaths clustering in patterns of 729 years. He suggested these might be bloodlines carrying the Watcher's charge. A year later, he died in his bathtub. Notes missing, his conclusion dismissed. Yet the shadow of his research lingers. The charter itself resists interpretation. Was it written by the Templars? Or was it given to them? The seal matches Templar iconography, yet the phrasing, "ignite the circle, seal the mouth," belongs to no known liturgical tradition. It reads less like commandment, more like code. A manual, not for worship, but for activation. And so we face the open question: who are the 13? Allegories? Bloodlines? Initiates waiting for a signal? The charter does not say. It does not need to. Its purpose is not explanation, but preservation, to ensure that when the wheel turns again, there will always be 13. The motif repeats: silence, broken arm, wheel, Saturn. The sigil is not alone. It is accompanied by text, by ritual, by living witnesses scattered across centuries. Together, artifact and charter form a mechanism, not relic, but recurrence. Think of the silence again. The sigil hums when aligned, yet its guardians are called silent ones. 13 figures, each a vessel for stillness, each a point in a living geometry. And when the mirror darkens, when Saturn casts its shadow on Virgo, the silence is broken not by voice, but by action. The charter closes with a line that has unsettled every scholar who has read it. The circle must be spoken not with voice, but with act. What act? Alignment, ritual, sacrifice. No one knows. But the silence waits, and the wheel remembers. The fact remains. The charter exists. The seal is pressed. The numbers align. Whether allegory or instruction, its message is clear. There will be 13, and when the time comes, they will act. So we are left with the hum beneath words, the silence between stanzas, the wheel fractured, yet still turning. And the question that lingers like breath in the dark: when the 13 gather, what will they ignite? Sometimes the past does not reveal itself to monks or mystics, but to men who were never looking. That is what makes the story of Dr. Leonard Duquesne so unsettling. He was not a historian, nor a priest, nor a collector of relics. He was a Swiss-born computational theorist, more at home among algorithms than artifacts. And yet in 2015 he stumbled into the wheel's orbit. The moment was ordinary. A guest lecture at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris, a student slideshow, a blurry image of a dull metal disc labeled simply Templar Relic Bezu 2001. The slide passed quickly. Most in the room saw only corroded metal. Duquesne saw ratios. He asked for the file. Within days, he was reviewing high-resolution scans, copies that had leaked into academic forums, circulating in quiet corners of the internet, where archivists traded in images too obscure to be cited. To anyone else, they were curiosities. To Duquesne, they were equations. He ran the scans through a pattern recognition model designed for cryptographic overlays in ancient papyri. What emerged stunned him. The angles between the sigil's arms, including the fractured sixth, did not scatter randomly. They aligned into a repeating sequence of prime numbers, not decorative, not symbolic, numerical intent. And then came the spiral. When Duquesne mapped the distances outward from the center, the arms resolved into a golden ratio spiral, perfect save for the fracture. He described it later in his private notes, as though the wheel was designed to reveal balance and then break it. The outer notches yielded more. Though irregular to the eye, their spacing matched Fibonacci intervals at the micron scale. Even the shallow grooves, those scratches that looked accidental, formed fractal resonances when modeled three-dimensionally. The sigil was not ornament. It was recursion, harmony collapsing into silence. At the heart, the tiny depression where the arms converged drew his attention. Too deliberate to be damage, too precise to be error. When modeled under simulated light, it produced lensing effects, dispersing illumination as a diffraction grating would. Duquesne began to wonder, what if the sigil was less a symbol and more a device, a cosmological computer, a machine powered not by electricity, but by alignment? Then came the number. Hidden in the ratio between the 5 intact arms and the broken 6th lay a constant, 729, to most arbitrary, to Duquesne, unmistakable, 3 to the 6th power. The same number that recurs in Hermetic mysticism, the same number named in the Charter of the 13 as the cycle of recurrence, the same number encoded in the manuscripts as the span between gatherings. 729 years, from the Templar dissolution in 1310 to the celestial alignment of 2039. The sigil was not allegory, it was a clock. Here is the historical fact. In late 2018, Duquesne published a peer-reviewed article in a small journal. Recurrence engines, geometry, fractals, and the temporal functions of esoteric devices. Few read it, fewer understood it. Months later, the journal was purchased, the article removed, the archive closed. The pattern feels familiar. Discovery, suppression, silence. Yet whispers of Duquesne's data survived. Colleagues spoke of his simulations. One claimed he had modeled the sigil's surface topography as a harmonic field collapse, collapsing precisely at 729 Hz. The same frequency the wheel is said to hum when turned under light. The number, the geometry, the sound, all converging. The callbacks tighten here. The Leontius manuscript spoke of a wheel that remembers. The Charter of the 13 commanded guardians once every 729 years. The Black Forest ritual echoed with a hum no mouth produced. And now a 21st century scientist, unmoored from myth, rediscovers the same constants in lines of code. Duquesne himself grew uneasy. In private correspondence, he wrote, "I do not know if I am deciphering intent or coincidence. Did someone design this, or did the pattern reveal itself to them?" It is the question that still haunts us. Did the Templars embed the number knowingly, or did they inherit geometry older than themselves? Ratios passed down from Sumerian stargazers, Egyptian architects, Arabic mathematicians. The silence thickens. If Duquesne was right, then the sigil is not passive. It measures, it resonates, it counts, and one day, perhaps soon, it will act. Some say his work drew attention he did not want. By 2019, he had withdrawn from conferences. Students recalled him muttering about structures whispering. One remembered him saying, "Math is clean, eternal, but what happens when the numbers start whispering back?" Fact blends again into theory. If the sigil is indeed a recurrence engine, then its activation may not mark destruction but transition, a reset of harmony, a silence that rewrites what comes after. And if so, the date is not metaphor, it is appointment. Duquesne's fate is uncertain. Some claim he lives quietly in Switzerland, teaching under another name. Others whisper he vanished, his files seized. What is certain is this: his work remains, if only in fragments, in the memories of colleagues, in leaked notes, in the whispers that circle back always to the same hum, the same wheel, the same silence. So we ask, if a scientist with no ties to relics or prophecy uncovered the same constants described in medieval manuscripts, then what does that say about the sigil? Coincidence collapses. The pattern tightens. The broken arm. The prime spiral. The golden ratio. The Fibonacci spacing. The hum at 729 Hz. The silence that follows. The wheel does not wait for belief. It waits for alignment. And so we are left with Duquesne's unanswered question. Did he uncover design? Or did design uncover him? When the wheel turns again, will we recognize the silence as accident or as intent? If there is one thread that binds the sigil's story across centuries, it is not the broken arm of the cross, nor the number 729, nor even the watchers who vanish into history. It is the sound that is not sound, the hum, the silence that vibrates, the tone no mouth sings, yet every witness remembers. Clausen heard it in the Black Forest, 13 figures circling a stone, their lips unmoving, yet the air thick with a note. Templar confessions recorded it under torture, knights drawing the chord that no longer sounds. Lionel Ashcombe wrote of it in 1623, the ring singing without voice. And in our own century, Duquesne S models captured it as collapse at 729 Hz, a resonance born not of metal striking, but of geometry folding into itself. Here is the historical fact. Sound at 729 Hz lies within human hearing, though faint. Yet recordings from resonance experiments with the Bezout scans describe something different, not an audible tone, but an interference, ears registering vibration though microphones detected nothing. The body felt what the instruments denied, a silence that shook. The ancients had a phrase for this, musica universalis, the music of the spheres. Pythagoreans believed planets sang as they moved, each orbit a note in a cosmic harmony, not heard, but real. Medieval mystics echoed the idea. Cathedrals were designed with ratios said to mirror heavenly chords, harmony as architecture, silence as structure. The sigil, it seems, preserves the darker inversion, a broken chord, a missing note, silence not as absence, but as disruption. Its fractured arm generates a resonance field that rings wrong. Frequency analysis reveals overtones inconsistent with symmetry, like a bell cracked, still ringing, but carrying the wound in its voice. Why does this matter? Because resonance is not metaphor, it is force. Sound can shatter glass, topple bridges, alter the rhythm of the human heart. Silence, structured silence, may act the same. If the sigil hums when aligned, it may not be a warning. It may be a mechanism waiting for the right frequency, the right eclipse, the right shadow to unlock what it was built to do. The callbacks deepen. The Charter of the 13 instructs its guardians to seal the mouth and ignite the circle when time curls upon itself. Seal the mouth, stop the voice, preserve the silence, ignite the circle, activate through resonance, not speech. The manuscripts speak again. We heard the broken spheres speak in silence. The silence is not passive, it is signal. Modern physics offers its own eerie parallels. At the edges of astrophysics, researchers study resonant nulls, points where waves cancel so perfectly that energy folds inward. A silence dense enough to shape matter. Could the sigil's geometry encode such a principle? A designed fracture, collapsing sound into stillness, until stillness itself becomes power? Those who have encountered it firsthand describe unease. Clausen grew paranoid, muttering about a wheel that hums. Ashcombe died with his mouth open, as though still listening. Even Duquesne, rationalist to the end, warned of numbers that whisper. If silence is a signal, perhaps it does not merely wait, perhaps it calls. And what then answers? Theories diverge. Some argue the sigil's hum is alignment with cosmic resonance, a tone of the heavens recalibrating itself every 729 years. Others fear it is an invitation, a frequency broadcast into silence awaiting reply. Still others suggest it is diagnostic, a tool measuring disharmony, warning of collapse in the music of the spheres. Whichever view we take, the motif remains constant. Silence not as void, but as event. A hum heard, but not recorded. A note that sings only through absence. It is easy to dismiss as pareidolia, the human tendency to find pattern in noise. But the recurrence defies dismissal. Black Forest, Lisbon Charter, Avignon Confessions, Bezout Sigil, Duquesne's models. Each speaks of silence as structure. Each circles back to the hum. One fragment of the Leontius Codex haunts most. The wheel does not end in fire. It ends in quiet. And the quiet begins again. The phrase suggests recurrence, not apocalypse. Silence as threshold. A pause before another rhythm. Imagine it. The eclipse shadow falling in 2039. The wheel aligned, Saturn cresting Virgo. And across Europe, a hum not heard with ears but felt in bone, in glass, in water. Birds pausing mid-flight, clocks faltering, the air suddenly thick, as if waiting. Not chaos, not destruction, stillness, silence as signal. The open question is not whether the sigil hums. Too many accounts, too many models say it does. The question is what silence at 729 Hz means. Is it calibration of a cosmic system, a retuning of spheres? Is it invitation, waiting for something beyond? Or is it, as some fear, the countdown's end? The last note before the wheel turns into a rhythm we cannot follow. The broken arm, the wheel wrong, the silence humming. The sigil does not sing, it listens. And perhaps in 2039, it will answer back. When the sun disappears, time itself seems to hesitate. Across every age, eclipses have unsettled the human heart. Ancient Babylonians marked them as omens. Chinese chronicles describe dragons devouring the light. Medieval scribes recorded birds falling silent, livestock panicking, crowds kneeling in fear. An eclipse is more than shadow. It is interruption, an event where the ordinary rhythm of sky and earth falters just for a breath. So what happens when that breath is written into the sigil itself? When astronomers overlaid the geometry of the Bezu sigil against historical eclipse maps, something extraordinary emerged. Two total eclipses, centuries apart, fall directly on opposing arcs of the wheel. The first, May 3rd, 1347, darkening southern Europe, including Languedoc. The second, July 23rd, 2039, shadows sweeping again across France and northern Italy, and between them, 729 years. Here is the historical fact. The 1347 eclipse was real. Contemporary records describe the world falling into a second dusk. In Carcassonne, a chronicler wrote that the sky trembled as if remembering. Months later, the Black Death began its devastating spread, reshaping Europe. Coincidence or consequence? The callback is impossible to ignore. 729 years later, in 2039, another eclipse will cast shadow over the same lands, and the sigil encodes them both, not as allegory, but as geometry. The broken arm of the wheel, when aligned on projection maps, points directly to the eclipse paths, within half a degree, too precise for chance. Skeptics point to the Saros cycle, the natural rhythm of eclipses, repeating every 18 years and 11 days. But these two eclipses, 1347 and 2039, do not share a Saros. They belong to different cycles altogether. Their alignment is not predictable. It is unique. And yet the sigil anticipated both. The question grows sharper. Was the sigil designed to mark not light, but its absence? Not the rising of stars, but the silencing of the sun. In manuscripts, fragments whisper the same. The Codex Leontius. The hour of shadow will be twice. The first to silence the world, the second to speak the seal. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as poetic allegory. But with the eclipse geometry mapped onto the wheel, the phrase feels more like instruction. Two shadows, two silences, one cycle. The implications disturb. The first eclipse preceded plague and upheaval. What will the second bring? Another collapse? Another silence? Or something entirely different? An activation? A turning of the wheel that has been waiting 7 centuries for this shadow to fall? Dr. Gyana May of Leiden University modeled the sigil against NASA's eclipse simulations. Her findings, never formally published, spread quietly in private circles. The fractured arm aligned almost exactly with the 1347 and 2039 eclipse tracks. It is either deliberate, she wrote, or impossible. And there is more. When the sigil's harmonic field was modeled under simulated eclipse light, resonance shifted. At ordinary illumination, the wheel collapsed at 729 Hz. Under occlusion, when the sun was blocked, the resonance destabilized, producing unpredictable fluctuations. As if the sigil was built to respond not to light, but to its vanishing. The silence deepens here. If the wheel hums when whole, what does it do when dark? Some suggest nothing, that the sigil is inert, its alignment's coincidence amplified by human pattern seeking. But those who have studied it most closely warn otherwise. The charter speaks of igniting the circle when time curls upon itself. Manuscripts whisper of the dark kiss coming twice. Clausen wrote of a hum in the forest. Duquesne measured collapse into silence, each fragment circling the same event, a shadow that is more than shadow. The callbacks tighten. 1347, eclipse, followed by plague. 2039, eclipse, aligning with the wheel again, 729 years apart. The hum, waiting for silence. What then is the eclipse to the sigil, marker, trigger, or signal? Some modern theorists, operating under the name chronostellum, believe the two eclipses are gates, an hourglass turned twice in 729 years. They speculate that during the 2039 eclipse, gravitational fields may ripple, electromagnetic disturbances may spike, even human perception may shift. Outlandish, perhaps. But history has always treated eclipses as thresholds, and thresholds demand crossing. The Leontius manuscript warned, "Let the dark kiss come twice before the circle breaks, then shall the last key hum again." The phrasing chills. Not prophecy, but timetable. Imagine the moment. Europe falls under shadow. Birds stop mid-flight. Mirrors refuse to reflect. And somewhere, in Iceland, in Lisbon, in a forest clearing, 13 gather, silent. The wheel turns. The hum rises, not loud, but undeniable. The sigil, if designed for eclipse, is not waiting for light. It is waiting for its absence. And so we return to the motif. Broken arm, waiting wheel, silence humming in the dark. The question remains, when the sun vanishes in 2039, will the wheel remember again? And what will silence choose to reveal? Not all relics are vast. Some are small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, yet heavy enough to carry centuries of silence. The Ashcombe ring was such an object. It surfaced not in a grand cathedral or hidden vault, but in the private journals of Sir Lionel Ashcombe, an English antiquarian of the early 1600s. He was not famous, not powerful, just another nobleman with a fascination for curiosities. Animal skulls, Roman coins, fragments of alchemical texts. But among these trinkets, one item consumed him. A ring too large to wear comfortably, forged of dull black iron, heavy as though cast to anchor more than finger. According to family lore, it had been unearthed in 1598 beneath a collapsed chapel on the Ashcombe estate. Alongside it lay a shard of black glass and a scroll so fragile it disintegrated at the touch. Only the ring survived. Sir Lionel kept it locked in a cedar box for years. He wrote that he could not bring himself to display it, nor to discard it. "A wheel malformed," he scrawled. "The sixth break unsettles me." He sketched it dozens of times. Always the same. A band etched with a six-armed cross. One spoke fractured. Sometimes he drew tiny dots circling the inside of the band. 13 in number, one always displaced. In his diary, he confessed to hearing something when he held the ring close to a mirror. Not sound exactly, but a silence deeper than death, as though the air forgot itself. Here is the historical fact. On August 12, 1623, a triple planetary conjunction lit the pre-dawn sky. Mercury, Venus, and Mars drawn together in rare alignment. Most observers saw a curiosity. Lionel saw a signal. That night, he placed the ring atop a mirror in his study and waited. His letter to his sister records the moment. The ring sang without voice. "I saw the sixth fall again. I feared it would open." He smashed it with a hammer. It took 4 blows. The fragments remained, but Lionel never slept properly again. Weeks later, he was dead. Officially, heart failure. But his manservant wrote in his own journal, "He died with his mouth open, as though still listening." The fragments survived. Centuries later, in 1998, metallurgists at Oxford examined them. Their quiet report, buried in a footnote of the Journal of Historical Materials, mentioned something extraordinary: microscopic engravings on the inner band, forming a spiral of 13 dots, one misaligned. Always the 13th, always the fracture. The callbacks resound. 13 stanzas of the Charter, 13 watchers in the Black Forest, 13 centuries whispering silence. Always one misaligned, always the broken arm, What was the Ashcombe ring? A personal relic? A fragment of the greater sigil? A key meant not to be worn but to be placed, aligned, awakened? Theories diverge. Some argue it was a token passed between watchers, a portable node of the larger mechanism meant to resonate when planetary alignments returned. Others believe it was part of a distributed system, a set of smaller rings, each inscribed with the same geometry, forming a circuit scattered across Europe. The more unsettling thought is this: what if Lionel did not destroy it to protect himself, but to prevent activation? His sketches obsess over the broken arm, his words over the silence inside the shadow. Perhaps he believed the ring was not artifact but trigger, and in breaking it, he may not have ended the silence at all. He may have released it. Again, silence is the motif, not absence, but event. Clausen heard it by the forest stone. Lionel heard it in his mirror. Duquesne measured it in code. Always the hum, always the silence that vibrates. The Ashcombe ring adds another layer: fear. Unlike manuscripts or pendants or sigils buried in chapels, this was an object small enough to hold, close enough to haunt. And Lionel, rational though he was, believed it dangerous enough to smash. Yet smashing did not free him. It consumed him. The fragments still exist, kept, according to rumor, in the Ashcombe family's private collection. Some whisper they are inert, broken beyond use. Others claim they remain active, that when held in darkness, the fragments hum faintly, as though still part of a whole. So we circle back. The wheel fractured, the 13th displaced, the silence humming where no sound should be. What if the sigil was never one artifact but many? What if its geometry was distributed across pendants, rings, mirrors, and stones, each a shard of a machine too vast to keep in one piece? If so, the Ashcombe ring was not a curiosity. It was a component. And the question remains, heavy as the ring itself. When fragments of silence gather again, what will the wheel awaken? Most secret orders announce themselves loudly. Symbols carved on lodges, manifestos printed, rituals performed in public masquerade. But not this one. If the threads are to be believed, the successors of the Watchers do not wear robes, do not preach, do not recruit. They remain what they have always been, silent. They call themselves many things. In fragments of correspondence, in obscure forums, in whispers overheard at conferences. The silent line, the order of the sixth light, continuance. The last name appears in the final page of the Leontius manuscript. Ut sigillum continuatur etiam cum oblitus est. That the seal might continue even when forgotten. Their presence surfaced not in legend, but in accident. In 2012, during renovations at a 19th century Jesuit seminary near Córdoba, Argentina, workers uncovered a chest sealed with lead. Inside, 13 notebooks. Small, identical in size, but penned in different hands. The contents were chillingly consistent: diagrams of eclipses, planetary cycles, charts of Saturn's resonance. And this phrase repeated again and again: the seal is not a relic, it is a rhythm. Here is the historical fact. The notebooks exist. They are catalogued by the Argentine government as esoteric instructional materials of uncertain origin. But weeks after digital scans leaked in 2016, 3 individuals reached out anonymously to the archivist. Each claimed prior access to the notebooks before they were ever public. Each wrote fluent medieval Latin. Each signed with the same symbol, a broken ring encircling 13 dots. The callbacks echo. 13 dots, one misaligned. The same geometry found inside the Ashcombe ring. The same cycle written in the charter. These contacts did not ask for access, they asked for return. They claimed the notebooks were stolen during transition and had been meant for the safe watchers. The archivist ignored them. Soon after, his files were corrupted, his email account erased. The voices vanished back into silence. Then came 2020. A cybersecurity researcher named Maya Ver discovered an encrypted subdomain hidden within a historical preservation website in Bruges. Behind layers of obfuscation, she found an archive of astronomical data, ephemerides stretching into the 24th century, acoustic charts of harmonic fields, eclipse maps, and scanned images of relics. The Icelandic stone slab, the Bezu sigil, the Ashcombe fragments. Beneath each image was a caption in Latin, Unus cadet ut alter loquitur. One falls to speak the next. And then she found the calendar, a digital countdown, updated daily, ticking toward August 4th, 2039. She posted a single screenshot on a private forum. Hours later, her system was hacked, her files were corrupted, and she received a cease and desist from a legal firm that does not exist. Maya vanished from digital life. The subdomain went dark. The callbacks tighten again. Always 13. Always 729. Always silence surrounding those who look too closely. Who are these modern revivalists? Are they blood descendants of the original Watchers, passing the charge silently through families? Or are they receivers, drawn by resonance, hearing the hum across centuries without ever being taught? Testimonies suggest the latter. Some describe dreams of wheels turning. Others wake to sketches of broken crosses drawn unconsciously in notebooks. One documented case, a cartographer in France, Lucan de Roche, vanished while mapping near Montségur in 2017. His GPS logs showed him walking in perfect circles around a central point. Searchers found nothing except the faint carving of a six-armed sigil in the bark of a tree. Desroches later reappeared 30 kilometers away, with no memory of what had happened. When shown a photograph of the sigil, he wept. It is as though the sigil itself pulls its keepers toward it, not by voice, but by rhythm. Not inheritance, but resonance. The silent line do not publish, do not evangelize. They gather, observe, and, if whispers are true, prepare. Their purpose is not persuasion, but continuation. To tend the wheel, to seal the mouth, to ignite the circle when the hour comes. We cannot know how many they are, nor where they live. Some say 13 at any time. Others suggest 39, cycling in threes. What is known is that their fingerprints linger, a countdown hidden in code, a notebook sealed with lead, a calendar that ticks towards silence. The open question remains. Are these modern groups preserving the sigil's legacy out of belief, or because they know with certainty that something will occur? The broken arm, the wheel turning, the silence humming. 13 dots, one misaligned, always preparing, always waiting. And the question hangs in the stillness. When the clock strikes 2039, will the silent line remain only watchers, or will they act? The land of Iceland is already half myth. Volcanic plains steaming like altars, glaciers grinding down to the sea, skies that shift from endless day to endless night. It is a place where silence feels alive, where the earth itself hums in geothermal breath. Perhaps that is why the wheel left echoes there. The first record comes from a 14th century saga, Stjörnu Sugur, the Tales of the Stars. Among stories of trolls and wandering saints appears an odd fragment. Men from the south came, carrying a circle of broken light. They spoke not, yet the stones answered. They built no house, yet the hill listened. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as allegory. But on a basalt plateau near Thingvellir, archaeologists uncovered something that shifts the tale into unease. Here is the historical fact. In 1969, surveyors found a ring of stones, 13 in number, set in a perfect circle 30 meters wide. One stone was toppled, fractured. Beneath it lay a slab carved with 6 arms radiating outward, one broken short. The same geometry again. The slab was removed quietly. Official reports list it as boundary marker, medieval origin. Yet photographs from the dig, leaked years later, show something stranger. The slab was not aligned to cardinal directions, but to celestial ones. Its broken arm pointed directly to the southern horizon, where Saturn rose in late summer skies. Local folklore adds another layer. Shepherds long spoke of a place on the plateau where no sheep would graze, where even birds avoided landing. They called it Tugn Ringur, the Circle of Silence. Visitors described the uncanny sensation of hearing nothing, even when wind whipped the grass. Not absence of sound, but a pressure in the ear, like a note just below hearing. The callbacks deepen. Silence again, structured and deliberate. 13 stones, one displaced. The broken arm pointing to Saturn. Always the same motifs, carried north across oceans, preserved in basalt. In 1983, a group of researchers from Reykjavik University attempted acoustic tests on the site. Though the slab had been removed, they measured anomalies, resonance fields at low frequency, strongest at 729 Hz. The same frequency Duquesne later modeled. Their unpublished report, smuggled onto microfilm, carried a single annotation in the margin. The sanctuary is not empty. It is tuned. What was this sanctuary for? A meeting place for watchers? A calibration node for the wheel? A northern mirror to the sigil in Bezu? Theories abound. Some argue it was an observatory, aligned to track Saturn's slow orbit across centuries. Others believe it was ritual ground, where the silent line rehearsed their gatherings. Still others suggest something stranger, that the sanctuary was not built by Templars or their heirs at all, but by earlier voyagers, Celtic monks, Phoenician sailors, or even civilizations now lost, leaving only geometry as testimony. Whatever its builders, the sanctuary carries the same fingerprints. 13 stones, silence in the air, alignment to Saturn, fracture encoded into stone. And the silence persists. Modern hikers still report dizziness, sudden nausea, or the sense of being watched when they stray near the plateau. One climber in 2009 described hearing a low bee-like hum, though the air was still. His compass spun briefly before returning north. He left the site immediately and never returned. If the Bezu sigil is artifact, the Icelandic sanctuary is environment, a landscape tuned to the same harmonics, a natural cathedral humming with silence. Perhaps the sigil was never meant to stand alone. Perhaps it was always part of a network, nodes scattered across Europe, each humming in anticipation, each tuned to the same shadow in 2039. The callbacks are unavoidable. From manuscripts to pendants, rings to charters, forests to glaciers, the same wheel, fractured and humming, waiting. Iceland adds weight, because here silence is not metaphor. It is measurable. It is physical. It presses against the body, reminding us that silence itself can be structure. And so the question lingers, colder than the Icelandic winds. When the eclipse shadow falls in 2039, will the sanctuary awaken again? Will the plateau hum, the stones vibrate, the silence break into something more? The broken arm, the wheel waiting, 13 stones, Saturn on the horizon, silence tuned at 729 Hz. The sanctuary remembers. But what does it wait to release? Every mystery carries not only what is revealed, but what is erased. For every parchment preserved in monastery vaults, another was burned. For every relic catalogued in dusty archives, another slipped quietly into private hands, never to be seen again. The sigil story is not just a tale of alignment and resonance. It is also a tale of suppression, of revision, of deliberate silence. Here is the historical fact. In 2018, Dr. Leonard Duquesne published his paper Recurrence Engines, Geometry, Fractals, and the Temporal Functions of Esoteric Devices in a minor European journal. Within 6 months, the journal was acquired by a corporate holding, its archive sealed, and Duquesne's article removed. No explanation, no errata, just gone. A digital silence. This is not an isolated case. Travel further back. In 1906, a scroll was recovered from a collapsed Templar outpost in Toma, Portugal. Scholars called it Spira Obscura. Its diagrams depicted nested spirals and intersecting arcs, later shown to model planetary resonance between Earth, Mars, and Saturn. Yet within a year, the scroll was lost from public access. Officially, it had deteriorated. Unofficially, copies surfaced in private collections, always incomplete, always fragmented. The callbacks return, manuscripts vanish, journals close, objects reclassified. Each time the pattern repeats, the silence grows louder. The broken arm does not just fracture stone, it fractures memory. Consider the Ashcombe ring. The fragments were tested at Oxford in 1998, revealing engravings too fine for medieval tools. The report noted an impossible spiral of 13 dots, one misaligned. Yet the finding was buried in a footnote, never discussed in full. Why? Who benefits when anomalies are filed away under miscellaneous or artifact of uncertain provenance? Theories emerge. Some whisper of church intervention, a centuries-old instinct to suppress anything that hints at cosmic machinery rather than divine mystery. Others suspect state actors, anxious that resonance fields and eclipse alignments might imply technologies beyond comprehension or control. Still others point to private societies, the so-called silent line or continuance, ensuring the knowledge remains theirs alone, parceled out only when time itself demands it. But revision takes many forms. Sometimes it is not silence, but distortion. A 17th century Jesuit chronicle described the cursed hum of heretics who sought music in the spheres. Later editions quietly altered the phrase, the cursed hymn. A single letter changed, and centuries of resonance hidden beneath a liturgical song. Or take the 1347 eclipse. Contemporary records describe birds silenced, air stilled, and a second dusk that trembled. By the 15th century, chroniclers retold it as allegory, the darkness of plague, not the shadow of the sky. History was bent, its edges smoothed, its resonance concealed beneath moral lesson. Here lies the deeper fear. What if suppression is not accidental? What if revision is itself part of the ritual? To fracture memory is to control alignment. To erase is to tune silence. The watchers may not have needed to speak because others did the erasing for them. The callbacks intensify. Iceland's sanctuary, reclassified as boundary marker. The Black Forest pendant vanished from Munich archives. The Silent Sigil, locked in private custody, its scans leaked only through whispers. Everywhere, the same motif. Discovery, suppression, silence. And yet, the silence never holds. Fragments leak, journals resurface, photographs escape footnotes. The hum finds ways to echo, even through the walls built to contain it. Suppression is never perfect, only delayed. Revision never erases the wheel. It only hides its broken arm until the right light reveals it again. So we ask, what is being protected? Is it fear of chaos? Panic at the idea that the heavens run on ratios, not grace? Or is it preservation, an ancient pact to guard the rhythm until the alignment returns? Some whisper, darker still, that suppression itself is activation, that by ensuring the knowledge remains incomplete, the watchers guarantee no one can act too soon. That silence is not absence, but part of the design. In the end, suppression and revision are just other forms of resonance. Noise inverted into quiet, facts bent into allegory, objects reclassified until their hum falls below perception. But the wheel turns regardless, and the hum beneath silence does not vanish. So we return to the question, if every age suppresses, edits, revises, what truths have already been hidden from us now? And when the silence breaks in 2039, will the revision hold? Or will the forgotten song be heard again, not as myth, but as resonance? The sea has always been a mirror. Its surface reflects the sky, its depths conceal forgotten roots. When the Templars vanished in the early 14th century, much attention focused on their castles, their treasuries, their sudden arrests. But ships leave fewer traces than fortresses, and silence spreads more easily across the waves. Here is the historical fact. In 1343, a naval logbook from the Hanseatic League, recorded the arrival of a small weathered vessel in Bergen, Norway. 3 men disembarked, cloaked and silent, bearing a red cross on white cloth. They requested no lodging, only supplies. Their destination was listed in Old Norse as Norderljos, the Northern Lights. What could knights of a dissolved order seek in the auroral skies? The trail grows colder as the sea itself. Yet in an Icelandic saga written a century later, we find mention of strangers from the south who built no chapel, carved no runes, but watched the stars and cut circles into the stone. The locals called them Stjörnuvörður, star watchers. They arrived, observed, and then disappeared again, leaving only wheels carved into basalt. The callbacks echo: wheels, circles, silence, star watchers. The same motifs carried across continents like driftwood. But the theory widens here, because the Atlantic is not an ending. It is a passage. In 2009, near Iceland's Snæfell's Peninsula, archaeologists uncovered a buried slab beneath a collapsed lava shelf. Its face bore 6 arms radiating from a circle, one fractured short. It matched the geometry of the Sigil, down to the broken arm. Official reports catalogued it as medieval cosmographic unknown. Unofficial whispers named it differently, a navigational key. What if the slab was not a destination, but a departure point? A marker not of where they had gone, but where they were going. Theories abound. Some suggest the Templars crossed the Atlantic centuries before Columbus, carrying not gold or relics, but the geometry of the wheel. Their purpose, then, was not colonization, but calibration. To plant new sanctuaries, aligned not with Mediterranean skies, but with stellar rhythms visible only from the far west. The evidence is fragmentary, but insistent. A 15th century map, the Carta Marina, depicts an unlabeled island west of Iceland, marked only with a wheel. Some scholars dismiss it as a whirlpool symbol. But when overlaid with modern star charts, the island's position aligns with the rising of Virgo in 2039, the very alignment the sigil encodes. Coincidence or cartographic whisper? Folklore carries its own testimony. Among Algonquian oral traditions in North America, fragments survive of pale visitors who built stone circles but no houses, who stayed only long enough to mark the stars. Their tools were described as iron that hummed when struck. Was this exaggeration, or the echo of resonance? And here lies the uncomfortable pattern. Wherever the wheel appears, silence follows. The Bergen logbook lists no further voyages. The Icelandic saga names no descendants. The Algonquian tale dissolves into myth. The hum is always there, then gone. But the sea remembers. In 1978, divers off the coast of Nova Scotia reported discovering a submerged stone platform arranged in a circle. 13 stones, 1 toppled. No artifacts were recovered, no dating confirmed. The site was dismissed as natural formation. Yet photographs show carving marks too deliberate for geology. The report was quietly shelved. If true, the pattern expands. Bézieux in France, the Black Forest in Germany, Iceland's sanctuary, and now whispers across the Atlantic. Each node separated by oceans, yet connected by resonance. 13 stones, a broken arm, alignment to Saturn, silence that hums at 729 Hz. Theories stretch wider still. Some claim the Watchers carried their task westward, ensuring that when Europe fell into plague and suppression, the circuit remained unbroken in new lands. Others believe the geometry itself required distribution, that to stabilize resonance across the planet, sanctuaries had to be built at multiple longitudes, each a mirror to the others. What would such a network mean? Not a treasure map, but a lattice. Not routes of trade, but circuits of silence. If the sigil is not a relic but a device, perhaps it needed more than one key. Perhaps it required an entire constellation carved into the earth itself, stones humming across continents. The callbacks grow heavier. 13 watches in the charter, 13 stones on the plateau, 13 notebooks in Argentina, 13 dots inside the Ashcombe ring. always 13, always one broken. So we must ask, did the Templars reach the New World not to conquer, but to listen, to place another stone in the circle, another wheel in the chain? And if they did, then somewhere across the Atlantic, beneath forest or sea, the sanctuary still waits. Waiting not for discovery, but for alignment, waiting for the hum to return. Because silence, as we have learned, does not vanish. It only waits for the wheel to turn. The Grail. Few words shimmer with as much weight in the Western imagination. It has been called a cup, a stone, a book, a bloodline. For centuries, poets and priests have pulled its image into their own designs, dressing it in gold, hiding it in allegory. But what if the Grail was never a vessel at all? What if it was the legacy we have been tracing all along? The hum beneath silence, the wheel beneath the stars. Here is the historical fact. In Wolfram von Eschenbach's 13th century epic Parzival, the Grail is not a chalice. It is a stone, luminous, inscribed with celestial patterns, capable of renewing life. Scholars long puzzled over the shift. Why would a cup become a stone? Unless the poet was echoing whispers of something seen, not imagined. A device, perhaps, heavy and geometric, that carried resonance rather than wine. The callback emerges clearly. A stone slab in Iceland carved with broken arms. A pendant in the Black Forest marked with Saturn. A ring in England etched with 13 dots, each described as unornamented, unadorned, but powerful. Not beauty, but purpose. Not relic, but mechanism. And then there is the hidden legacy, the Watchers. Documents like the Charter of the 13 describe not knights guarding treasure, but nameless figures guarding time. Their duty was not to carry chalices, but to tend wheels. The refrain found in the Canticle of the Hidden Ones makes it plain. We guard the hour, not the blade. We are the space between the stars. So perhaps the Grail was never lost, because it was never a single object. Perhaps it was a role, a charge, a pattern encoded across centuries. The true legacy of the Templars may not be relics hidden in catacombs, but sanctuaries tuned to silence, watchers trained to wait, and devices encoded to hum when the eclipse shadow falls. Still, fragments link the Grail myths to the same geometry. A 14th century French manuscript, Le Mystère du Sceau, depicts a cup etched with 6 rays, one fractured, resting not on a table but within a circle of 13 robed figures. The caption reads, "Not drunk, but spoken, not filled, but tuned." Suppressed quickly, the manuscript survives in fragments only, housed in the Bibliothèque Nationale under restricted access. Theories grow bolder here. Some suggest the Grail was a metaphor for resonance itself, the harmonic field that nourishes, heals, or awakens when aligned. Others claim it was the sigil, broken and misunderstood, reimagined by poets into a cup to hide its mathematical purpose beneath mystical allegory. Still others whisper that the Grail was the lineage of Watchers, a bloodline carrying the silence through centuries, reappearing when the wheel demands. The callbacks align: the Charter of the 13, the Icelandic Sanctuary, the Nova Scotia Circle, all whisper of continuity, not possession. The Grail is not something to hold. It is something to serve, to protect, to keep humming quietly across time. But legacy has its dangers. Suppression and revision ensure that what survives is fragmentary, distorted. The Church reshaped heresy into blasphemy, resonance into hymn. Later writers transformed mechanisms into chalices, guardians into kings. And so the legacy grew hidden, buried under centuries of metaphor. And yet, the silence persists. In 2012, workers in Córdoba, Argentina, unearthed 13 notebooks sealed in lead. Within them, diagrams of eclipses, Saturnine cycles, and circles fractured. On one page, a phrase repeats, "The seal is not a relic, it is a rhythm." Here, the Grail's hidden legacy speaks most clearly. Not an object, but a rhythm preserved, a hum awaiting its moment. So what if the Grail quest was never about finding? What if it was about listening? Listening for the silence that speaks, the hum that turns the wheel. The knights who vanished into forests, mountains, and seas may not have failed. They may have fulfilled the legacy by keeping the rhythm alive, each sanctuary a heartbeat in a larger design. And this returns us to the most haunting thought. If the Grail is the hum, then August 4th, 2039 is not a prophecy of destruction, but of resonance completed. The silence closing not as absence, but as revelation. The wheel turning not as end, but as reassembly. The watchers waiting not for war, but for awakening. The Grail, then, is not lost. It is humming beneath us, encoded in stone, in silence, in time. The hidden legacy is not treasure, but transition. A rhythm so old it feels like myth, so precise it feels like destiny. So we must ask, when the wheel hums audibly in 2039, will we recognize it as the Grail at last? Or will we dismiss it again as myth, missing the silence that has been speaking all along? Night always arrives quietly, even when the sky is filled with signs. The hum beneath silence does not roar, it waits, pressing softly against perception. And now, after centuries of fragments, manuscripts, pendants, charters, rings, sanctuaries, stories, we arrive at the convergence, the point toward which all the threads have been pulling. Here is the historical fact. On August 4th, 2039, the heavens will perform a rare alignment. Saturn, cresting the shoulder of Virgo, a solar eclipse cutting across southern Europe, a resonance interval of exactly 729 years since the eclipse of 1347. Each motif we have traced, the broken arm, the Charter of the 13, the Icelandic stone, the Ashcombe ring, points not to metaphor but to this hour. The callbacks are inescapable. The wheel carved in Bezu, the silent procession in the Black Forest, the Carta Marina's Forgotten Island, the notebooks in Cordoba. Each, in its own way, anticipates the same moment. Not a prophecy of fire, not a horn-blown judgment, but a pause, a fracture in harmony, a silence so deep it becomes structure. What happens then? The theories fracture as wildly as the wheel itself. Some whisper of awakening, that the resonance will lift perception, tuning human minds into alignment with patterns older than civilizations. A collective grail, not drunk but heard. Others fear collapse, that the silence marks not a gift, but a cancellation, the unraveling of the harmonic lattice that holds time and matter together. Still others suggest transition, that the sigil is a switch, built not to destroy, but to reassemble, to retune reality itself into a new rhythm. The open questions multiply. Is the sigil a machine waiting for activation, or simply a mirror reflecting patterns too vast for us to comprehend? Are the watchers guardians of time, or are they themselves part of the mechanism, living components of a circuit spanning centuries? And yet, beneath every theory, the same motifs return. 13. Silence, the broken arm, the wheel, the hum. 729. Saturn. Each like notes in a score, repeating until they form not noise, but music. The music of the spheres, long dismissed as metaphor, perhaps waiting to be heard again when the eclipse shadow falls. The watchers, too, return in whispers. A sealed envelope delivered to the French Ministry of Culture in 2002. It is not too early. It is precisely now. 13 dashes, one broken. An intercepted letter in the 1800s referring to the reawakening of the fracture beneath the fir trees. The testimony of a knight in 1312. The last light is theirs. Each voice separated by centuries, yet each speaking the same phrase in different keys.
The callbacks tighten here. Silence as signal, suppression as design, revision as ritual. Perhaps nothing has ever been hidden, only delayed. Perhaps the Watcher's true work was not to keep us from the truth, but to keep the truth from arriving too soon. And if so, then the clock has almost struck. The iron tongue, the mirror, the wheel. Not metaphors, but components. Not prophecy, but protocol.
In the end, the sigil teaches a subtle lesson. Endings are never absolute. They are pauses, fractures, silences between notes. The Templars may have feared heresy, but what they preserved was not blasphemy. It was rhythm. A rhythm so precise, it counts centuries as beats, eclipses as drumstrokes, Saturn's orbit as refrain. And now, we stand near the final cadence. August 4th, 2039, is not a date scrawled in a margin. It is the silence written into stone, into rings, into songs, into time itself. When the shadow passes, when the hum at last becomes audible, the wheel will turn again. Whether into collapse, awakening, or something stranger still, no one can yet say. The open question remains: what is revealed when silence speaks? Will the mirror forget us, or will it remember more than we wish? So rest now. You have followed the wheel through archives and forests, through seas and sanctuaries, through broken rings and forgotten chants. You have traced the hum across centuries until it leads you here, to the threshold. The convergence waits. Breathe slowly, listen. Somewhere beneath the ordinary noise of clocks and cities, the deeper ticking persists. It is not the end of the world. It is the end of a rhythm. And when that rhythm breaks, when the silence folds open, we will learn what the sigil has been waiting to show all along. The wheel turns, the silence hums, the hour approaches. And when it comes, will we recognize the sound?